how much do you believe in yourself when things aren't going your way? Because it's easy to believe in yourself when life is working out, when things are moving, when you're making progress, when people around you can see it too. But I think the real test happens when none of that is happening. When you make decisions that don't work out, when something you've worked hard for, it falls short, when you question the direction you're heading in. I think those are the moments that decide whether you move forward or whether you slowly drift back to where you started. I've realized that backing yourself has very little to do with believing that you'll always make the right decision. I think it has more to do with believing that no matter what happens, you'll keep moving forward. That you'll learn something, that you'll adapt, that you'll keep trying. For a long time, I believed confidence came from certainty. But now I think confidence comes from knowing that you'll survive uncertainty. Because if you stay on this path long enough, you'll realize that disappointment becomes unavoidable. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're just starting off something, whether you've been doing something for years, or whether the world thinks you're successful. Life will always find new ways to test you, and maybe that's exactly how it's supposed to be. I think about athletes sometimes, take the World Cup. Every single player that steps onto that pitch is already exceptional. They're one person out of millions who dreamt of wearing that jersey. And you don't get there without losing matches, you don't get there without injuries, you don't get there without rejection or doubting yourself at some point. We only tend to think of the trophy, we often forget how much they had to endure just to stand there. And I think life works the same way, not everyone has to become a world champion. The standard doesn't have to be extraordinary. Sometimes the standard is simply showing up again tomorrow. Some days you'll make progress, some days you'll barely hold your ground, and some days you'll even take a step backwards. And I don't think any of those days define you on their own. The only thing that compounds is whether you keep showing up. And I think that's where self-belief comes from. It doesn't come from telling yourself that you're amazing or that you'll never fail. It comes from proving to yourself time and time again that you'll keep showing up. Because life has a way of making today's disappointment feel permanent. It narrows your perspective. It convinces you that this moment is the whole story. And it almost never is. There's usually another opportunity waiting beyond the one that didn't work out. You just have to stay in the game long enough to reach it. And that's another example why comparison is so dangerous. If you start comparing your life to someone else's timeline, you stop looking at your own. You forget that everyone started from somewhere different. They've had their own lessons along the way, their setbacks and their challenges. The only journey that you can actually influence is the one that you're already on. Maybe that's why I've stopped asking myself whether everything is going to plan. The only question that I'm interested in is if I'm actually still moving forward. So let me leave you with this one question. When the next disappointment inevitably arrives, will it convince you to stop, or will it become another reason to simply keep going? Think about it, and thank you for listening. I'll see you guys next week.